Business decision making in XAT. Fine. So it's always been a tricky section, slightly seems very subjective, difficult to prepare for. There's not enough sufficient practice material. So how do we go about this? The first port of call for everyone is got to be previous year XAT decision making papers. Go through them. There's decent chance that you solve a bunch of those, you see the answers, you're still not convinced about some of the answers. That happens to almost everybody. Remember that this is a tough cookie to crack. Right? So the first most important takeaway here, you need to find the kind of question that you're naturally gravitating towards the right answer. Once again, question selection is going to play a very vital role. So if you're good with questions concerning an ethical dilemma and you get them right generally, then you should stick to those. If you're very good with a business context, you should stick to those. You're very good when there's a personal context involved. There's a father and a son, a nephew and an aunt. Then you should go towards those questions. You're able to pick that nuance really well. Fine. There are some questions which come like a seemingly geopolitical context and all that. If you're good at that, you should go towards that. And the question that you're not comfortable with, you read the passage and you don't get the hang of this, you don't know what's sitting underneath that, leave them. Your hit rate cannot be really poor. Then you get buried in this section. It's way better to attempt 8 and be confident of 7 than to attempt 12 and be confident of only 2. And so leave, and the whole exercise of doing previous year XAT questions is to first up to become better at leaving questions. Then you get better at answering them right. You should know what you are good at, what you are not good at. That takes at least 10, 12 BDM exercises. The best place to start BDM is the previous year XAT paper rather than any mock. And so keep that in mind. Now, what do we do at an individual XAT question? Right? So obviously it's case by case, it changes, but a bunch of overall pointers to keep in mind. First up, don't do anything, don't suggest, your answer cannot suggest anything even borderline illegal or unethical. You can't say, if the answer choice says, in large companies, some indiscretions are bound to happen, we'll handle this internally. No indiscretion can happen, you cannot handle anything internally, it has to be clear out in the open. Right? Second, don't generally, as a rule of thumb, don't gravitate towards the passive option. There will usually be a choice which says, don't do anything and wait for events to unfold. That's a passive option. The don't do anything option is generally not correct. Even if your gut instinct says that, reevaluate it. Be very clear about that fact. Right? Third, and this is very important, look for clues in the language. Very important. So go through the question. Usually the level of importance given to an issue is described in the language. And so sometimes, I recently saw one of the previous year XAT papers. It says that they had discovered some financial irregularities. And so this is very different from investigating complaints of impropriety. And it seems to two similar phrases. Discovered financial irregularities. A group has discovered this. There's no ambiguity. This has happened. They're not saying we're going to look into this. Investigating complaint, if somebody has raised a flag and then you're going to look into it. Discovered financial irregularities, you've got to fire the guy. It is that serious. Right? Investigating complaints of impropriety or suspicions of impropriety, somebody has complained, we've got to look into it. So from the language, you have to figure out whether there is an action that needs to be taken or there is further investigation that needs to be done. That can straight away eliminate a bunch of choices. And so read and reread to know whether it's a serious offense or just a beginning of an investigation. And that's one thing. Now the language part matters in the tone matters in the extent to which somebody takes it seriously. And so the board can demand an explanation or request a discussion. So demand an explanation, that means they're more or less saying, I want you to offer to resign. If they're saying request clarification, that means, hey, I heard this from somebody, why don't you come and have a breakfast meeting with us? And so the language, the vocabulary matters. So read and reread the choices and the question to know whether there is some serious indiscretion that has happened or some line that may have been crossed. There's a complaint sitting somewhere. Whether serious action is called for or some mild investigation is called for. Be very clear about that. In terms of answer choices, which of the following options, if executed in some order, is least likely to cause damage? Stay out of those. Then you're going to pick 3 out of the 5 choices and then put them in order. Then you're evaluating least likely. So there's layer after layer after layer of subjectivity. Leave those. The questions where you have to select 3 out of 5 and put them in a sequence, always dicey. Right? The questions where you're saying which of the ones clearly suggest that something is wrong, that is better, or the most compelling reason, that is better. Least likely to cause a precedent, vague. You have to worry about what precedent. You might interpret it in one way, the question might interpret it the other way. So stay out of those kind of questions. So the question selection is going to matter. The broad ground overviews never suggest anything illegal, unethical, even borderline. So be very clear about that. Don't gravitate towards the passive or slightly passive option. And that's a negative thing. On the positive front, what option should you gravitate towards? The more consultative, let's get all stakeholders on board, that kind of thing. Be very clear to pick up tone, whether it is severe or mild, whether a decision has been, where something investigation has been completed or it's going to start. That's important. In terms of attention to detail, look at the question. Sometimes a question gives away a certain word. There was a very wonderful question in last year XAT where they said, which of the following options is the most suitable and sustainable? It was a wonderfully suitable option which can handle the immediate pressure point, but was not sustainable. So the question is saying, don't give me the best thing to do now. Give me the best thing to do now, which will set up for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years. So that kind of looking into the detail matters. So read the question one more time, and then think about, okay, why have they used the word sustainable here? Why are they saying financial irregularities? Why are they saying discovered and not investigated? That kind of details definitely matters, fine. Best wishes. We have a bunch of questions that we have solved on decision making, which is up on the YouTube channel, which all of these are from previous year XAT papers, with some amount of detailed explanation as to what the thought process is and why we arrived at a solution. That will definitely be helpful. So go through that to get some amount of practice for decision making. Once again, best wishes for this.